Today I'm here, but I'm talking about the Biostatistics Collaboration Unit, and it's a complete change of pace. So here's the solution for all your lockdown woes, and your 15 months of quiet is a statistics test. So imagine the simplest experiment we can. The researcher is interested in knowing what proportion of cats are tabbies. So this is as simple as an experiment can be, and sends me, the research assistant, out on an evening, and I come back and say, well, I saw 4 of the 10 cats I saw were tabbies. So what is the best guess as to the proportion of cats that will be tabbies in the population of cats? And this is my screening question. So many of you will be thinking, I suspect, that the answer is 4 out of 10. That's the obvious best guess. And what I can't do with everybody's videos off and responses is see any responses of anyone who's putting their hand up saying, no, that's not the answer. Or anyone who's saying, yes, of course, that's the answer. So what if I was to suggest actually the answer might be 33% instead of 40%, 3 out of 9? Well, that could be the answer. In fact, it would be the answer if what you did was go out that evening and say, I'm going to look for cats, and when I've seen a reasonable number, let's say 4, I'm going to see how many cats in total I've had to observe to get that number 4, and that's when I'm going to stop my study. In fact, then the answer would be 3 out of 9. And in fact, of course, the answer could be almost anything, because this is statistics. And the crucial point is, it will depend on how you design that experiment. Seeing 4 out of 10 cats does not tell you how you designed the experiment. It only tells you what data you have. So that's the statistics test over. I can't see how many people passed it and how many people were quite happy with the 4 out of 10 answer. But when we're talking about translational research, we're almost always talking about a statistics exercise. So this is the collation of quantitative data for usually numerical analysis and interpretation. So that's almost the definition of statistics. So whenever you're undertaking translational research, you are undertaking statistics. There are a very, very small proportion of studies that don't involve statistical activity. What happens in the basic sciences? Well, how can I say this? Let's be unequivocal. If you didn't respond, it depends, as soon as you saw my question on the first slide, then if you actually go through that activity of collating and analysing and interpreting and reporting statistical data, you are working beyond your competence. And you might want to consider whether that has implications for the scientific conduct and actually for professional activity. So is there a problem? Yes. Here's an article in Nature from many years ago. Why current publication practices distort science, and it slates the biological sciences as a whole. Obviously there are rare exceptions, but in general, statistical considerations tend to be very, very poorly dealt with in the basic science literature. Has that improved over time? No. 5 years later, here's a news feature in Nature. P-values are not as reliable as many scientists assume. Basically, scientists don't understand p-values. And another 5 years later, coming more up to the modern time, scientists, again, statisticians, epidemiologists, are saying, for heaven's sake, you don't understand p-values, you don't understand statistical analysis, please stop getting it wrong. So is it all doom and gloom? Well, in clinical research, things are different. And so for many translational researchers that I see, they're coming from life sciences research and edging into clinical research. And it's a bit of a culture shock. Clinical research is usually multidisciplinary. We saw from Alison's slides, the eagle eye will have spotted that there's a statistics group within the trust to help you with your research. The NIHR themselves define core disciplines for grant applications, which obviously includes statistics, because almost everything is about the collection and interpretation of quantitative data. Health economics, behavioural science, patient public involvement are all core to NIHR studies. And in the International Conference for Harmonisation, Good Clinical Practice Guidelines, it is assumed that statistical work will be done by someone who's appropriately qualified and experienced. I don't know who assumes that, because in practice, it's very rare that that's the case. But in clinical trials undertaken to the international standards, that has to be the case, and the sign-off has to come from a statistician. So why would you need biostatistics collaboration? What would that look like? Really, you should have a senior biostatistician within your team, or at least giving input to your team. They have expertise in the design, analysis and interpretation of quantitative data. And it'd be usual in academic research to have that statistician as a co-applicant or a named collaborator, depending on the level of engagement with the team. And it would also be good practice, of course, to include costs for the undertaking of the statistical work that will be required during the project, which is usually done at a more junior level, a research associate, research assistant, research fellow, because that takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of number crunching, and it can be done by someone who's relatively cheap. So as an example, the clinical trials model, when you apply to the NIHR for clinical trials funding, or to any of the major charities, this will be a fairly standard model, that there will be a senior statistician as a co-applicant with a small percentage of their time for supervision of statistical aspects of the study, and that there will be a junior statistician whose jobs will involve making sure the data collection forms and the data management mechanisms are going to provide valid data for analysis, undertaking interim monitoring of the accruing data, making sure things are going to plan, programming the analyses, drawing the graphs, making up the tables correctly, and co-authoring the paper, of course, with the methods and results sections, and some input to the discussion about the strengths and weaknesses and plausible implications. As a rule of thumb, we would say a third of a statistician throughout a clinical trial would be the going rate. You could say, well, actually, it's not really a third throughout. It's about 30 or 40% at the preliminary stages where you're setting up the data collection mechanisms. It's maybe only 10% throughout the actual patient recruitment phase, and it's 50 to 100% at the end. But what we find is that funding bodies actually tell us they'd much rather see it as an average throughout rather than sort of in bits and pieces. And it's much easier to budget that way, of course. For other statistical designs, you'll see almost nothing changed in that slide. So again, you'll need the senior statistical co-applicant. The research associate, research assistant, research fellow still has all those same things to do. There's probably not so much in the way of interim data monitoring going on as there are for the trial steering committees and trial management groups and data monitoring committees that are required for clinical trials. But still there's data validation to undertake and checking assumptions throughout. And typically, I would say, although it's not so well established, clinical trials are relatively easy from a statistical perspective. Other studies tend to require more statistical time rather than less. So what can we do about this? Well, we set up a few years ago a Biostatistics Collaboration Unit within the faculty, and the idea is that we are there to collaborate with researchers who want to undertake clinical research, and that obviously includes most translational researchers. So we're there to collaborate with you on internal bids, such as the access to expertise. We can provide a statistician as your expertise that you're accessing, but also for external funding bids to the MRC, to CRUK, BHF, Wellcome, NIHR, and other major charities and funding bodies. We'll provide the expertise in the research design, the quantitative analysis and data interpretation that you need for clinical research. And as a guide that's sort of currently staffed, you'll see there we have one sort of senior research fellow, we have a number of people at sort of lecturer and research fellow grade, and a larger number at the sort of cheaper grades where funders are much more happy to pay for people. But notice that these are all academic and research staff. This is not a sort of service, a sort of technical support service. This is an academic collaboration. There's a clue in the name, Biostatistics Collaboration Unit. We are interested in academic collaboration and making sure that things are being done in a statistically sound way. What are the advantages of this? Well, the faculty likes this. It means we have full recovery of costs for the work that's being done. The funders love this. It means they're being reassured that the statistical work is being done by professional statisticians and will be done correctly. Research teams usually like this when they get their heads around it. They normally end up with higher quality publications and are much more likely to get the funding in the first place. And the other advantage, of course, is that there's cover for the team if somebody goes off on parental leave, for instance, they can be replaced through the collaboration unit. It's also possible to appoint to part-time posts, which is very important, of course, because if you advertise, I want 30% of a senior academic for a period of time, you're unlikely to recruit to that post unless they're already in post. So the biostatistics collaboration model allows people to appoint these part-time posts short-term, which would be impossible to advertise for, really. And the staff involved in the collaboration unit love this because it allows them to have career progression, professional support from a statistics team rather than sitting in isolation for a short and indeterminate amount of time with a research team. So just to finish, if you want to know more about us, there's our website there within the university system. You can email us at biostatsinquiries@Manchester, and there are links there to our close colleagues and collaborators, the NHR Research Design Service in the Northwest and the Manchester Clinical Trials Unit. So thank you very much.